Pierre Poilievre just threw shade at Mark Carney over pipelines while simultaneously defending an MOU with Alberta that has some Canadians scratching their heads and others doing victory laps. And honestly, the whole thing is more lead than a Timbits wedding cake. Buckle up, because we're about to dive into the political chess match that's got Ottawa buzzing, Alberta grinning, and the rest of Canada wondering if they missed a memo. So here's the tea. Pierre Poilievre sat down with Brian Lilley for what was supposed to be a cozy year-end chat, you know, the kind where politicians usually just recap their greatest hits and wish everyone happy holidays. But no. Poilievre came loaded with opinions hotter than a double-double left in your car during a Calgary summer. The main course? His thoughts on the Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta, sprinkled with some spicy commentary about why Mark Carney, yes, Mark Carney, former Bank of Canada governor and potential Liberal leadership hopeful, isn't serious about building pipelines. And let me tell you, when Poilievre starts talking energy policy, it's like watching someone juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle. Exciting, slightly dangerous, and you can't look away. Let's start with the MOU itself, because if you haven't been following along, you might be wondering what the heck an MOU even is. Memorandum of Understanding sounds like something your high school guidance counselor would make you sign before letting you take shop class, but in political terms, it's basically a formal handshake. Not legally binding, but definitely a we're on the same page kind of deal. The MOU between a potential Poilievre government and Alberta is all about cooperation on energy, resource development, and getting Canadian oil and gas to market without having to navigate the bureaucratic obstacle course that currently makes building a pipeline feel like trying to get a toddler to eat vegetables. Technically possible, but requires an act of God. Now, Poilievre is painting this MOU as a win-win. Alberta gets federal support for energy projects, the feds get to look like they're actually doing something to boost the economy, and Canadian energy workers get to keep their jobs instead of watching investment dollars flee to Texas faster than snowbirds in November. On paper, it sounds great. Alberta's been feeling like the overlooked middle child of Confederation for years, watching as their oil and gas sector gets strangled by regulations while simultaneously being told they're the bad guys for wanting to, fund hospitals and schools with resource revenue. So an MOU that says, hey, we see you, we value you, let's work together, is like getting a handwritten apology note from someone who's ghosted you for 3 years. Long overdue, but better late than never. But here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting, I mean messy. Critics are pointing out that moves are about as binding as a New Year's resolution. Sure, they sound good when you announce them, but when push comes to shove, they're just words on paper. There's no legal mechanism forcing anyone to follow through, which means if political winds shift or if implementing the MOU becomes inconvenient, it could end up filed away in a drawer somewhere between promises we meant to keep and that gym membership we never use. Poilievre's banking on the fact that his conservative base, especially in Alberta, will see this as proof he's serious about energy development. And honestly, in Alberta, that's worth its weight in oil barrels. But opponents are saying this is all hat, no cattle. A shiny announcement that plays well at rallies but might not survive contact with reality once governing actually begins. Which brings us to the Mark Carney situation. And oh boy, this is where Poilievre really turned up the heat. For those not obsessively following Canadian political insider baseball, Mark Carney is being floated as a potential Liberal leadership candidate if, and this is still a big if, Justin Trudeau decides to step aside. Carney's got the resume. Former Governor of the Bank of Canada, former Governor of the Bank of England, UN Special Envoy on Climate Action. The guy's CV is longer than a prairie winter. And recently, Carney's been making noises about supporting Canadian energy, even suggesting he'd be open to pipeline development. Which sounds great, except Poilievre isn't buying it for a second. During the interview with Lillley, Poilievre basically called Carney's pipeline promises about as believable as a diet starting Monday. His argument? Carney's been a huge proponent of climate action, ESG investing, and transitioning away from fossil fuels. So suddenly pivoting to let's build pipelines feels less like a genuine policy position and more like a calculated political move designed to make him more palatable to voters who actually want Canadian energy developed. Poilievre's essentially saying, you can't spend years championing policies that choke the life out of the oil and gas sector and then expect people to believe you've had a come-to-Jesus moment about pipelines just because it's politically convenient. And honestly, he's got a point. It's like someone spending a decade as a vegan influencer and then suddenly opening a steakhouse. Sure, people can change, but you're gonna get some side eye. The thing is, Carney's supporters would argue he's being pragmatic. That supporting Canadian energy doesn't mean abandoning climate goals, it means recognizing that the world still needs oil and gas, and it's better if that energy comes from Canada with higher environmental standards than from countries with, let's say, more relaxed attitudes toward environmental protection. It's the if people are gonna eat burgers anyway, they might as well be ethically sourced argument. But Poilievre sees it differently. To him, Carney represents the exact kind of elite, international, climate-focused establishment thinking that's been holding Canada back. And in conservative circles, especially in Western Canada, that critique lands harder than a slapshot from a pissed-off hockey player. So where does this leave us? Well, Poilievre's playing a smart game here. By simultaneously promoting the Alberta MOU and attacking Carney's credibility on pipelines, he's doing two things at once. First, he's positioning himself as the only leader serious about Canadian energy development. Not just talking about it for votes, but actually putting frameworks in place, even if those frameworks are non-binding moves. Second, he's preemptively kneecapping a potential Liberal rival by framing Carney as a flip-flopper who can't be trusted on the issues that matter most to energy-producing provinces. It's political Aikido. Use your opponent's momentum against them before they even fully enter the ring. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say, the pipeline that's not in the ground. Canada's energy sector has been stuck in neutral for years now. We've got the resources, we've got the technology, we've got workers who want to work, but actually getting projects approved and built? That's been about as easy as teaching a cat to fetch. Environmental assessments that take longer than some people's marriages. Court challenges from groups who, whether you agree with them or not, have perfected the art of tying projects up in legal knots. Provincial federal jurisdictional disputes that make Thanksgiving dinner arguments look civilized. And through it all, billions in investment have packed their bags and headed south, taking jobs and opportunity with them. Poilievre's bet is that Canadians, or at least enough Canadians in enough ridings, are tired of this. Tired of watching our energy sector get hamstrung while we import oil from countries with, let's charitably say, interesting human rights records. Tired of virtue signaling that feels great in theory but results in less economic opportunity in practice. The MOU with Alberta is his way of saying, I'm not just complaining about the problem, I've got a plan. And whether that plan is robust enough to survive the reality of governing, well, that's a question for another day. Now, the Liberals, if they are smart, won't let this go unanswered. They'll argue that Poilievre's approach is reckless, that we can't just bulldoze environmental protections for short-term economic gain, that Indigenous consultation matters, that climate change is real and requires real action. And honestly, those aren't bad arguments. The challenge for the Liberals is they've been making those arguments for years while simultaneously failing to get much of anything built. It's one thing to say we need to balance environment and economy. It's another thing entirely to actually do it. And right now, the scoreboard doesn't look great for Team Red. As for Mark Carney, if he does decide to throw his hat in the ring for Liberal leadership, this pipeline question is gonna follow him around like a bad smell. Every campaign stop in Alberta or Saskatchewan, someone's gonna ask him to square his climate credentials with his newfound love of Canadian energy. And his answer better be more convincing than trust me, I've evolved. Because Poilievre's already planted the seed of doubt, and in politics, once that seed's planted, it's awful hard to dig it back up. Here's the bottom line. The MOU with Alberta is Poilievre's way of showing he's serious about energy development, even if the mechanism itself is about as legally binding as a pinky promise. His attack on Carney is political positioning at its finest, designed to paint himself as the authentic energy champion and his potential rival as a fair-weather friend of the oil patch. Whether voters buy it depends largely on whether they believe Canada's energy sector needs a champion or a referee. And that, friends, is the fundamental divide in Canadian politics right now. Do we unleash our resources and worry about the consequences later, or do we proceed cautiously and risk missing the boat entirely? Poilievre's made his choice. Carney, if he runs, will have to make his. And Canadians will ultimately decide whose vision they trust more. So there you have it. Poilievre throwing punches at Carney while promoting an Alberta deal that's got more questions than answers. Just another day in Canadian politics, where nothing's ever simple and everyone's got an angle. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to stay on top of all the political chaos happening in Ottawa and beyond, smash that subscribe button because we're pumping out content faster than politicians can dodge questions. Drop a comment below with your take. Do you think Poilievre's MOU with Alberta is brilliant strategy or political theatre? Is Carney's pipeline pivot genuine or just good marketing? Let's debate it out. And hey, share this with that friend who's always complaining about Canadian politics but never actually knows what's going on. Be the hero they need. I'll catch you in the next one, where we'll probably be untangling whatever new political mess emerges by tomorrow afternoon. Because let's be real, this is Canada and the drama never stops.